there's a lot of times when trying to look stuff up for me becomes difficult because there's certain things like I don't necessarily know a whole lot about, or I'm trying to learn more about them. But for me, it'll become this meta game of like, what do I even call what I'm trying to talk about, right? Because an issue with search engines now is that they're not search engines, they're advertisement engines. Um, so they won't give you results related to what the fuck you looked for. Because the more time you spend on there, not me, but the average individual is an idiot who doesn't use ad blockers. And the more time you spend on there, or the dating app, or whatever it is, um, the more ads you see. You know, again, for the ad, almost nobody uses ad blockers in real life, um, unfortunately. But you know, that's already a confounding factor. But then a lot of times for stuff that I'm trying to look for, there's a concept like I fully understand what I'm trying to look up. I don't know what the fuck I'm supposed to be calling it. And I sort of mentioned that in the other video because I was thinking about these concepts and like one of the things I was thinking about like how video games represent curved surfaces and they use polygonal approximations, right? So they like polygonate. I'm going to make that word up now. Polygonate verb to create a polygonal approximation of, right? Polygonate, like a cylinder, for example, 4, 5, 8-sided cylinder, whatever, like it's so common to represent a pipe or like whatever type of cylindrical object in a video game. But the thing is, most of the time, these polygonal approximations, at least in video games, you'll notice that when they do the approximation, like, so you imagine the circle, and so you go from the center to the perimeter of the circle. That's where your like first two vertices are at, and then you just draw a straight line between them. Well, if you do that, that short side will be the chord of that part of the circle, right? Well, that has a nice property in a video game where that means that the the bounding box will, like on any axis will be equal to the longest side of whatever the object is, right? So if you had a circle, if you had a cylinder with a radius of 1, no matter how you polygonated the cylinder itself, however many sides you chose or whatever, the radius of that cylinder would still be equal to 1. As opposed to where if you like took the outside polygonal approximation, right? So basically the imaginary lines coming out from the middle of the circle, those extend out till wherever they would intersect with the tangent, and like that's the triangle. If you polygonate it that way, well, now the bounding box of the object is actually bigger than the original like intent or whatever. And you, like most cases, you probably don't want that. um but anyway, as I had mentioned with the idea of like, so I was thinking about like packing arrangements and shit like that. And there's this one dude, I love his shit, Tom7. It's an older video, but I don't think I ever actually watched it yet. But it was like about Rupert, Rupert cubes or something. And as he was talking, he doesn't really talk about it in the video, but I was thinking about packing arrangements and kissing numbers and other shit like that. Like, I don't know if you would call it like topology or just, I don't know, whatever. But, um, kind of relating with that other shit, and I was talking about like the chord of a circle when you do a polygonal approximation. Uh, I started thinking about what I mentioned in the other video, which is, it's like, how do you determine not just how many objects of a particular dimension will fit inside a volume? How do you determine whether an object would even fit inside, like be fully, circumscribed by a volume in the first place? And the closest I can get to that is basically just taking, what I call the 3D hypotenuse, right? Um, And so, if you want to, so the regular hypotenuse is just, square root squared, the square root of x squared plus y squared. Well, in this case, what I call the 3D hypotenuse is just the square root of x squared plus y squared plus z squared, right? However, again, as I already mentioned with the pixels concept, that length that you get out of that is an infinitely thin line. It has no dimension. I mean, outside of that, just that angle. So, well, chances are any object you're trying to put in something has a volume to it, right? It's not, if it were infinitely thin, you wouldn't even be able to see it. Because remember, even like a hair, like your head hair, yeah, it's really, really thin, but it still has a volume to it. But then, so my question was, or what I was thinking about was, when you're trying to determine that, it's not just that longest side or whatever that matters. It's also, you know, the, second longest side, so to speak, or whatever, or even just the radius of the object. So I was thinking about that. You kind of have to measure the bounding box of the object as well, right? Um, and so for an example, let's say you were trying to put like a cube inside another cube, like a rectangular cuboid, whatever. You get what I'm saying? So, again, it's like a camera tripod inside a duffel bag. Like it might fit at an angle, but it wouldn't necessarily fit. Like if the numbers totally matched perfectly, that 3D hypotenuse versus the length of the tripod, but the tripod has other dimensionality to it. So even though if those matched, it probably still wouldn't fit. Now if it's a bag or something, they can bend and this and that. Okay, maybe, but that's what I was thinking about. It's like, you have to sort of consider the bounding box of the object and then sort of like imagine the chord, so to speak. And when I say it in this context of like the chord of a cube, I'm imagining like, one way you can make a duodecagon is, which he mentioned in that video. He was talking about something else, but as a perfect analogy, you could take a cube and basically lop off every corner of it. And now you've got a 12 sided, it's basically a three-dimensional octagon, right? In a way, you think of it like that, but you get what I'm trying to say. It's sort of like taking a square and lopping off the sides to make an octagon. Well, so that's sort of like three-dimensional, like cut on the corners of the cube. I'm calling that the chord of the cube, because the plane that creates that edge is like internal to the actual overall. It's like once you make that, the bounding box will just be that original cube, right? That's what I'm talking about. Well, I was trying to look that the fuck up, and I don't find anything saying that. In fact, everything I found, it was either telling me, well, the chord is specifically a reference to circles or this, and it's like, dude, that's not what I was asking. I'm asking, is there an equivalent term for that same type of idea as a cube? It was either just telling me that no matter what I phrased it as, or I found this weird shit that it was like, I never heard of this before. But it was like chord cubes, but it meant chord like guitar chord, right? Like musical chord, which is annoying because chord in a math sense is also spelled chord, right? But chord cubes, and I read a little bit of it, and it's like, dude, it just sounded made up to me, right? Like keep in mind, I'm a nerd. I research a ton of technical topics, and then at the same time, I taught myself music theory, and I was trying to read the stuff, and to me, it just looked like, how like when motherfuckers will talk about how water has memory or something, but they don't mean it in a generic sense of like, oh, like computer memory. That electron is on that part of the RAM chip, or like, memory foam, like it like remembers your shape, so to speak, just because it conforms to you, and then it kind of will stay like that for a while after you get off it or something. Or you pour water into a cup and it's the shape of the cup just because of the physical imposition, and like, but it's like, you could say that the water is like remembering the shape of the cup, as opposed to just the molecules just going off, flying off in random directions or something, right? But no, they literally think that water can remember stuff like, like you would remember your childhood or something. Or like the bullshit, where like people will try to explain relationships and other stuff, like in the sense of quantum mechanics. And I don't mean this like hippie spiritual shit is all over the place where people say, oh, opposites attract and bullshit like that. But like the motherfuckers that are like that, they're literally, they're not using quantum physics or whatever as an analogy. Like they're like literally saying it's like identical. Oh, like here's the Brownian motion and blah blah. Like they really think it's the same thing, and it's like opposites attract. It's like, no, dude, relationships are not magnets. That's not how it works. Just because, oh my god, Avogadro's constant or like blah, like it's bullshit. But I researched tons of musical theory stuff, and I just heard about this shit, chord cubes or something. Am I an idiot? I don't know, but my point being, it's like, it's not like I'm not familiar with these topics. And that doesn't mean I know everything, but it's just the way that it reads to me. It's like they took real world ideas, or I should say pre-existing ideas. It's like circle of fifths. Oh, circle of fifths, chord cube. And it's like, but the circle of fifths is a metaphorical thing just to help get the point across. But like their shit is reading, like for an example, they were talking about, oh, well, the norm of the scale, or whatever the fuck they said, but then you click norm and it links to the Wolfram Alpha page for like the norm of a vector space or something. And it's like, dude, it's music. It's not a mathematical vector. I don't know. But it was kind of agonizing to me because it sort of feels like the same thing where, I don't know, like a lot of people will just make up snake oil type bullshit to sound smart, but frame it in such a way to sound plausible. And you could like, it's the foot in the door tactic of, well, this other shit I said was true, right? And it's, oh yeah, circle of fifths. But like, for me, it's more like I'm struggling to try to even figure out what the fuck to describe something as. But it's like nobody has anybody ever called, you like cut off the side of a cube. Has nobody ever called that the chord of a cube before? I don't mean like the actual CSG operation. I just mean that like imaginary plane that basically is a triangle, right? Um, like, has nobody ever tried to refer to that like interior measurement like that in 3 dimensions as a chord before? Like, I kind of don't believe I'm the first one to ever describe it like that. I don't know. I was on this rabbit hole of trying to figure out if there's an answer to that. So apparently 3D hypotenuse is wrong. Apparently cube chord is wrong. Or I'll just get a bunch of nonsense stuff. And it's like, dude, it's already hard enough. These search engines don't even want you to, like, even DuckDuckGo does this. And this is why it pisses me off. My connection is really spotty. But even if you set it to not auto load, it's not a paged interface. It's still, you click load more and it just puts more on the same page, which will piss you off as far as memory usage. But then the problem is, it's like, well, if I click load more, but then my internet shits out right then, now I got to refresh the page or it just won't show anything else. But then every time you refresh, they give you the results in a different order, right? So like, even like, why would you ever randomize search? Like even YouTube itself does this. And it's like, dude, it's hard enough to find shit out. And then on top of that, I'm having to deal with that. Why it's like, I don't even know what to call what the fuck I'm talking about. And I don't even know if I really had a point to that. I guess I just wanted to rant about how the fuck could 3D hypotenuse not be considered like a real term or something. Like, I mean, if I say it, I think you understand what I'm trying to convey, right? Is that not what everyone else called it? Okay, well, why not though? Like, this would be the perfect thing to call it. But I was thinking about, chords and all that, partly because I think computer graphics is cool, and the idea of the precision or lack of precision of different, approximations. It's like numerical approximations of integrals. I think a lot of people don't have a real world experience with it, and like, I've done graphs on graph paper before and actually measured it off of the cubes of the graph paper, right? And this and that, but I don't know. I'm almost out at 15.